What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Men of the Kingdom show. My name is Kyle. This is my co-host, Aaron. If you're new to the show, we want to say welcome. The purpose of our channel is very simple. We want to help men live successful lives according to God's design. And if you're one of our faithful viewers, we obviously want to say welcome back. And real quick, if you have not already, we want to encourage you to like and subscribe and turn on the notification bells for our channel so you can stay up to date with every episode we post, including the one tonight, which we have a very special guest that Aaron's going to tell you a little bit more about.
Yes, sir. So this is a big one, you guys. We're really excited about this. So if you watched our episode with Brian McKenzie, that was already a treat. Now, Brian is a self-proclaimed 15-day NFL veteran. Very impressive, great episode. If you haven't, check that one out. But tonight we have a really special guest, a 15-year NFL veteran. If you're Vikings fans like us, it'll be a name that's familiar to you, Shaun Hill. So Shaun played 15 seasons in the NFL on a variety of teams, and he's here tonight to talk about the spiritual lessons he learned playing in the NFL, worldly success versus what he's now experiencing as a teacher, educator, coach. And this was a great episode. Kyle, I don't know if there are any things that jumped off the cuff for you. I was moved by Shaun's humility, and I know that our viewers are going to be too.
Yeah, for sure. There's a million things he covered that I don't want to spoil them for you, but just a lot of value in this episode. So yeah, take notes, get a notebook. We highly encourage you that when we have guests on, to take down some notes because it's things you can apply to your life and lessons that they learned through their experiences. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Shaun, thank you for making the time to be on here. Obviously, it's an honor for us to have you. We've heard great things about you. Now to finally have you on the show, it's awesome. And just to kind of kick it off, obviously when people hear Shaun Hill, I think they initially think of the NFL, quarterback, all those things, but I kind of go back a little bit further. And I listened to a few interviews you had. One particular was on the Dan Patrick show. I don't know if you ever remember this, what year it was. And it caught my attention because he said, Shaun Hill, how should I introduce you? Should I say NFL quarterback, et cetera, et cetera? You said, you know what, just call me Shaun Hill. And you just kind of have this humble attitude about you. So kind of take me back. How would people describe Shaun Hill growing up through high school? How would you describe yourself? And would you say you're similar to the man you are now, or was there kind of a transformation process through that? How did you kind of get to where you are now? But more importantly, how would people describe you back then?
I don't know. It's a little bit scary to even think about how people would describe me back then. Well, I come from humble beginnings. I'm from a small town in Kansas. Both my parents were in the education system, so they were working at the school, so I couldn't get in much trouble. And always loved sports and really wanted to work hard at sports. And so I put the work in, but after high school, I wasn't recruited by a single 4-year school in America at any level as a quarterback. I had some offers as a tight end and punter and safety and things like that. So I went to Hutchinson Community College and played there for a couple of years. And then from there, got some opportunities. Took the one out in Maryland, which was a little bit of kind of a leap of faith. And then, things kind of just went well there, not without some bumps in the road, but and then a pretty humble beginning in the NFL. I wasn't invited to the combine, wasn't drafted. So kind of the whole journey's quite a bit different than most people's.
Sure. I was reading through some of the YouTube comments on just watching some of your highlights and stuff, and everybody on there. Yeah. There was actually one guy, and I can't remember his name. He's like, Shaun was my quarterback in high school, and he's just a great dude on and off the field, and people just have this high praise for you. So it was just kind of cool going through there and seeing what everyone was saying. I'm curious though, you kind of mentioned when you went to the NFL, you weren't invited to the combine, all these things. Was there a pretty big chip on your shoulder to try to prove people wrong? Or were you kind of, hey, I know what I'm trying to achieve? Or what was your attitude as you're kind of going through these and people were maybe not giving you the shot maybe you felt like you deserved?
Well, people talk about the chip. I don't know if I had the chip or not, to be honest with you. I had confidence in myself, and that's one thing when we go through and myself and Brian McKenzie, we go and talk to high school and college quarterbacks and their coaches together in a room, and we do kind of a leadership thing, and I talk about the confidence piece. And confidence for me was earned. I didn't roll out of bed confident. I never went from one level to the next. Like, man, I'm gonna show these boys what's up. It was earned through number one, being willing to try, and number two, being willing to prepare. So I was prepared at every moment, but I was always willing to just, you know what, let's see what happens. Let's throw our hat out there and give it everything we got and see where we're at. I remember having a meeting with Ralph Region. It was after our senior year, and a Canadian League team was going to fly me in to work me out. And he set me down. He's like, I really think you should consider this Canadian thing. I think it's good for you. You just don't have what it takes. You don't have the arm strength to play in the NFL. And I was like, well, I appreciate that, Ralph. But all due respect, I think I'm gonna go ahead and try it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I necessarily had a chip, but I was willing to try. I was willing to give it everything I had and see what happened. And I was willing to prepare.
Yeah. One more question, I'll let you jump in. I think this is so relevant today because we live in kind of a culture where we want everything like easy, smooth, quick. And obviously your story, you were all over going from here to here, and it wasn't a straight path. And I just think about my own life and other guys. And I guess, what advice would you give to guys maybe in their mid-20s, 30s, or even 40s, where they just feel like they're not where they want to be, or maybe the path hasn't been smooth, or they're just having questions like, man, like where do I go next type of thing? Like, what advice would you give to guys who might be feeling that way now, and how should they navigate that season of life of feeling maybe unfulfilled, or like they're not achieving where they should be at the time of life that they're in?
Man, so my approach at every level that I went to was make the team today. That's it. Make the team today. Do what you got to do today to get a call back tomorrow. And I never looked, and that's hard for men, because men want to project out, and we want to, and that's great, to have long-term goals and to project out, and that be a thinker that way, and that's fine. But when we're in it, like, it is a day-to-day grind. And man, and one thing I tell these athletes, if you want to be a consistent player, then you need to improve one small thing every single day. Just write that down. One small, at the beginning of the day, write down what that one thing is that you're going to work on that day. And you keep stacking those small improvements up over time. And then that's how you get where you want to be. This is not an instant gratification. Well, football for sure is not an instant gratification world, or at least it wasn't for me. But I have a feeling neither is the business world or anything else that's worth accomplishing. It takes small wins day after day. Yeah, that's what I'd say. Just make the team today, and however that translates to your life right now. But that was a major approach for me.
That's good.
Should you jump in? Yeah. So what I was thinking of when you were talking about that is kind of going back. I'm a Vikings fan, so I'm familiar with you as a football player, and remember going to training camp when I was a kid, and seeing all those guys out there. I think it's cool as you get older, though, you start to realize that football players are more than just athletes, right? Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. The awesome thing about folks like yourself is finding out that faith is a big part of your belief system and kind of how you operate. So was your faith and was your belief in the Lord, was that there throughout your NFL career? And if so, I'm just kind of curious what role, because I got to imagine that faith played a big role from high school to college to the pros. So what did your faith life look like, and how did that kind of propel you and keep you in the game to keep making the team every day?
I wish I could go back and say that I was been a Christ follower since I was 12, like Brian McKenzie. But I just can't. I can't. My story's probably not too dissimilar from some people that might tune in here. So that's good. Yeah, I grew up in a home that went to church, and we're believers and all those things. I was in FCA, and I did all those things, and then about the age of 16, I decided, you know what, you talk about humility. I think I probably lost it about 16. I felt pretty good about myself, and I really started taking interest in the ladies and things like that. And but what's interesting about that is I absolutely stopped following Jesus about age 16. at age 18, I've got an option here. I can go and play possibly Division II basketball. But I had just this, just this sound in my head that no, you need to go play football and you need to play quarterback. And so truly God, even though I wasn't following him, truly God was leading me on the path that I was on. Even taking the deal out at Maryland, I was offered after my freshman year to go to University of Kansas, University of Tulsa, which I tried walking on at Tulsa 12 months before that, and they wouldn't have me. Now they're offering me a scholarship.
Crazy.
And I didn't take it. I didn't go to University of Kansas. I felt like I owed Hutchinson another year.
Wow.
So all along the way, God was putting on my heart and on my mind where he needed me to be, even though I wasn't following him. I didn't come back to, so I go through college, just a complete disaster. My first stint at Minnesota, I'm a disaster of a person also. Go out to San Francisco, and now I'm starting to have some success on the field. So I'm a disaster again. I meet my wife, and things start. Well, first before that, I met Trent Dilfers. Trent Dilfers was he was knocking on my door. He was knocking on my window constantly, not in a bad way, in a good way. Answering questions that I had. So he was kind of the first one to plant the seed a little bit. I met my wife. She was coming out of college and she was seeking. So we're out in San Francisco at the time. And I truly believe this. I got traded to Detroit, where people go to have their careers die at that time.
Especially quarterbacks.
That's true. Yeah. I got traded to Detroit because God knew that I wasn't going to make that transition with the same guys that I've been running with for 4 years out in San Francisco. It just wasn't going to happen for me. I needed a fresh start. So I got out to Detroit, and Drew Stanton one day, it was this time of year, it was off season. And he didn't, the way he did it, it kind of fooled me. He said, "Hey, what are you doing after this?" I said, nothing really. He said, "Oh, well, you should come to Bible study then." And I was like, dang it. If you would have just said, "Hey, you want to go to Bible study first?" Then I'd have been like, I'm going to go play golf.
You got awfully busy.
Yeah. But
that's good. That's free game right there. You can put that one in our back pocket.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's right.
That could work for dating, Bible study. You could use that for a few things.
For sure. But that's one thing that everybody talks about around the NFL was Dave and Ann Wilson, who are the chaplains at Detroit at the time. They just had one of the strongest ministries in the NFL. So that's where, and then my wife and I got married, and so that's where things started to turn around for me spiritually. And then it really kind of went to a whole nother level after I got out of the NFL, and I've been out 5 years now, and kind of settling into our life here, and getting plugged into the community and into the church and into ministries and things like that, and raising kids. So that's kind of how it went for me. It's like I said, I wish that I could go. I mean, life would be a lot easier if I could go back and it changed that path. But at the same time, God used it. He was directing my steps, even though I wasn't following him.
That's amazing.
That's cool. I do have a quick random question. I always like to ask people this, because you had such a long career in the NFL. But if sports were not an option, what do you think you would have done throughout that time? What do you think you'd be doing right now? Who would Shaun Hill be career-wise?
I have no idea. Honestly, I was a kinesiology major, and I was, I don't know, about halfway through my junior year. I was like, why am I in this? This is stupid, I'm not going to do this. But I don't know. I used to tell people whenever, because I never answered the question very well. Hey, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd always tell people I drive for UPS. So maybe that would have been one. My whole family is educators, teachers, and coaches. So that might have been a direction that I would have finally went. I don't know. It's so hard to say, honestly. Sure. Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah. So I have a question kind of building off of two. You were talking about your transition from team to team in the NFL. And this is more just a question that I'm personally interested in, but I'll kind of tell you the reason why is that Kyle and I talk about this a lot of how, and you sort of alluded to it too, how as guys, we always have visions, right? We say, I want to be more successful. I want to play at the highest level. A lot of the guys who are watching this, they probably play sports or have played sports to some degree. The ultimate vision of that is saying, I'm going to play in the NFL or the NBA, whatever it may be. But as we've gotten older, we've kind of learned that you make a little bit more money, a little bit more temptation comes with that, and I think that translates to anything. So my question to you in that vein is, what's something about the NFL? And I'm not talking on the field, but I'm talking the overall life as an NFL player. What's something about the NFL that you would say that most people aren't aware of, or something that you wouldn't know just being a fan?
Well, I think a lot of people think you show up at the stadium at noon or 1 and you play on Saturday or Sunday, and then you don't show up till the next week.
Then you just count your money the other 6 days.
Yeah, and that's not the case at all. It's 7 days a week during the season. It's a grind. Those guys, honestly, those guys go out there and they play on Sunday at a high level against absolute beasts of men with injuries that would keep most people with a desk job at home. Mm-hmm. Truly, like pulled hamstrings or a bad back or a shoulder that's dislocated or whatever, and they're out there playing on Sunday afternoon, and most people would call in sick to work with a desk job with the same ailments. They are they are some bad dudes, man. They really are. And I have when we watch them, man, I have a whole lot of respect for them because I know how they're going to feel on Wednesday or, Tuesday. Sometimes it takes a couple of days for some of those things to show up. But I'll say this too. There's a lot of strong believers in the NFL. They don't get a whole lot of attention. The crazy knuckleheads, for some reason that must sell better. I don't know. But there's a lot of believers in the NFL, and I believe this is why. Most people in the business world or whatever, you kind of gradually grow, and then you really start to see success maybe in your late 30s, 40s, 50s is kind of where you reach your peak in your business life or whatever it might be. But it's a longer, more gradual growth. In the NFL, by the time you're 22, you're rich, you're famous, you've met all your goals. You're in the NFL, you've met all your goals. So you've attained everything, and then you realize, wait, this isn't fulfilling. So what might take somebody in the business world or in another profession 30 years to figure out, in the NFL, you can figure that out pretty quick, that this isn't fulfilling me. There's still a God-sized hole in me that can only be filled by him. So that's one cool thing about it. Not everybody fills it with God, and I didn't either for a long time, but there are a lot of really strong believers, and I think that's why.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I kind of want to jump into it, Shaun. You live by the 6 C's that we talked on before coming on here with some of your coaching and some of the things you do with players. Could you just run through for the listeners what those are and maybe a brief synopsis on what each one means? And then 2, I know you mentioned a little bit, and I don't want to take the thunder, but one of them is confidence. And you mentioned that didn't come, easy. You had to kind of earn everything. And you mentioned it in previous interviews. So I'm curious if you could just touch on that, because that's something that stood out. Most people would think like, oh man, this guy's got to be the most confident guy, NFL quarterback, all these things. Like, what did you mean when you said, that was one of the C's that hasn't always come easy for you, and kind of walk us through the other 5 as well?
Yeah. All right. So we'll start with the confidence piece. Like I said, it was earned. I grew up in a small town, but we played a lot of basketball, and I was on traveling teams at an early age. So I was thrown into situations that were a little bit uncomfortable at an early age. And man, sometimes that's hard to do with our kids. I think about that because my oldest is he didn't fall too far from the tree. So sometimes he struggles a little bit with that too. But putting them in uncomfortable situations, letting them go out, and then guess what? The next time they go out, they're like, you know what? That wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
Right.
Now they've got a little bit more confidence, and they can continue to build on that. So that's kind of how it was for me. Like I said, I was just willing to try. I was willing to say, you know what? Thanks for the scholarship offers of 4-year schools as a punter. I want to try playing quarterback. That's just what, I don't know why God put that on my heart. But I was just always willing to try. And then in that I put in all the preparation needed. So that's what I gained confidence. So if you go back to the NFL schedule, so you play on Sunday, Monday, you come in, you put that game to bed, you watch that film, you get a workout. Now Tuesday, we'd come in, we'd get another workout, and now we're starting our opponent, our opponent film study. So every Tuesday I walked in and I watched the defensive opponent. I left there scratching my head, like, man, I don't know how we're gonna get a first down, let alone beat these guys. Because I don't care who you turn on, every last one of them are good. They are good defenses, they got good players. Yeah. But by the time Wednesday rolled around and we put that film study to the game plan that was given to us, now I've got by the time I got through Wednesday, I feel pretty good about the way we're going to attack the things that they did on normal down and distance. So then after Wednesday practice, now we're doing our third down study. All right, so we'd do our third down study Wednesday night. We'd come in Thursday morning and we'd install our third down package. All right, so same thing. I'm like, man, 3rd and 3 to 6, they bring it. I don't know what are we gonna do? When you start the film study. But by the time you get through Thursday, you see your plan, you apply it to what they do. You're like, you know what? All right, we got these boys. So then after Thursday's practice, now you're doing your red zone study. All right, and same thing. You're like, man, these dudes are tough in the red zone. Hope we can run the ball today. All that stuff. Anyway, you come into Friday, the same thing happens. You apply your game plan to what they're doing. So your confidence gains throughout the week. By the time you turn on the film Saturday and you go into your Saturday night meetings, you're like, man, I don't know how these guys are going to stop us. We've got something for everything they're going to do. That was the cycle every week for me, every single week. Tuesday, don't know how we're going to get a yard. Saturday, they can't stop us. So just being willing to prepare. That's how confidence grew for me. The other C's that we talk about for leadership, character is a big one. So we break that out. One of my favorite character traits is perseverance. I love a person that's been through some stuff. Truly, I think about some of the great leaders I've been around. Well, just think about Jesus. When Jesus comes back, when Jesus reappears to the 12. Jesus is showing his scars, right? He's not hiding his scars, the things he's been through, right? Because we have hope in people that have been through stuff. Let me read this from Romans 5 verses 3 and 4. But we also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces endurance or perseverance, and endurance or perseverance produces character, and character produces hope, right? So we all follow people because they give us hope, right? And how do we get hope? Well, it happens through development of character, and character is through endurance, and endurance is from sufferings. So rejoice in your sufferings. All right, and you can I tell people, show your scars, let people see your scars. So that's one of my favorite character traits that we talk about, and there's others that we go into, being responsible and integrity, being devoted. Devoted is a good one. I asked for a show of hands in the room. I tell them not to show their hands because it's every one of them. Like, how many of you guys have somebody in your life who has a better idea what you guys need to be doing on offense? And I said, I know it's every last one of you. Every last one of you has a better idea. Either you have a better idea or somebody in your life has a better idea of what you guys should be doing on offense. And I tell them this, I say, every offensive system ever developed has been successful for somebody. Every offensive system ever developed has been unsuccessful for somebody. And the difference is devotion to it, right? And so, that's one thing I try to get these kids to really buy into the system that they're in, because it's more about just being devoted to that. And then the last one's enthusiastic, and that's another good one for that I really appreciate about high character leaders. Is that is number one, it's 100% in their control, and I attribute enthusiasm to your effort and your attitude. Those two things. Your effort and your attitude, 100% in your control. Nobody else should have any control over those two things ever. And that's something that you can bring every single day. Great effort and great attitude. All right. So we already talked about confidence. Coachable. Coachable is a big one, or in the business world, correctable. Every good leader, like if you're not correctable or coachable, then you can't, listen, everybody understands you're not perfect. Everybody understands you're not perfect. So I love leaders that are coachable. One of the greatest examples of this to me was Tom Brady. He went to when he got traded to Tampa Bay, and we saw this happen to him in New England. But all of a sudden, like the first 5 weeks of the season, Bruce Arians, about 3 of those weeks, is calling out Tom Brady in the national media about his play. Like the first 5 or 6 weeks, and about half the time, our quarterback's got to play better. Things like this is the greatest player of all time. Right. Number one, I was sitting there scratching my head because this is not Bruce Arians' style. He doesn't do that, or he hadn't in the past. So I'm just sitting there just like, yeah, that's Tom Brady. Tom Brady told Bruce Arians to call him out. I truly believe this. Told Bruce Arians to call him out in the national media because why? Because now everybody understands if Tom Brady can get called out, if he can be coachable, now everybody else is coachable. The whole rest of that roster is now coachable because the leader of that team decided he was going to be coachable. All right, so that one to me is a huge one. The other one is caring. Philippians 2 verses 3 and 4. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Trent Dilfers taught me this. So when I think of selfless, and that's verse 3, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. He said this about, he taught me this. When things go bad, and we're talking about in the media, when things go bad, use the word I. I could have been better on third down. I could have given him a better ball on that one. When things go well, use the word we. Hey, we had a great game plan. We went out, we executed. When things go great, use the word they. Man, offensive line, they stepped up today. There was nobody around me. Wide receivers, they got open. They got open the whole day. So when things go bad, use the word I. Take it all yourself. It saves the rest of your people, the rest of your teammates, the rest of the people you're leading from having to answer that question. When things go well, then hey, we can all celebrate in that and share it. When things go great, deflect it off of us because it wants to. The glory wants to come onto you as the leader, but it shouldn't be. Deflect it. Share that with the rest of the guys in a football setting and in a business world, and men and women. I have to catch myself on that. But caring is selfless, is sacrificial, and then it's servant. All right, Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. All right, and you talk about being a servant. That's huge. There's no better example of being a servant than Jesus, right? Courage. I tell people this is another C. I tell people that it doesn't matter what your leadership style is. Right, because I want everybody to feel comfortable in their own skin and their own leadership style. But no matter if you're a quiet leader or not, every good leader has the courage to say what needs to be said when it needs to be said. Right, and to me that's courage. And the last one's consistency. And every good leader to me is consistent. And when we break it down into the football world, there's a process, and we talked about our weekly process just a little bit ago, how I would gain confidence. But there's a pre-snap process, there's a post-snap process as a quarterback for every single play. So pre-snap, every play of every game for the rest of your life, if you got a quarterback or your kid's a quarterback, you break the huddle, you come to the line of scrimmage, you see the play clock. You start with the safeties. You start, or is it one high? Is it too high? Then your eyes kind of come out to the corner. So they press or they off. Now you're looking at the linebackers. Are they bowed? Are they bossed? Are they even? Come to the defensive line. Is it an over front? Is it an under front? Is it an even front? Is it an odd front? Right. So there's all these things. And does it all match up? Is this an under front with backers bossed? Is this safety a little bit lower than that one? The strong dog's coming. So all these things. There's a process to every single play, and that happens in about 5 seconds before everybody even gets in their stance. Right. And there's a post-snap process on every single play, and then the process of preparing. But preparation is huge. We talked about that also with the confidence piece. But my favorite part about becoming a consistent player is practice habits. And you want to apply that to life. It's just habits. It's your and I'm talking about the little things, the foundations for what we do. There's a pre-practice routine that I take all the kids through, and it's the same stuff that you learned in 6th grade. And the guys who make it in the NFL, the ones who actually reach their potential, every last one of them, to a man, are the ones that are out there well before the whistle, and they're doing the stuff their 6th grade coach taught them before we even get started. The ones that are rolling out there right at the whistle and then getting in the stretch lines, man, none of them amount to what they could have. Practice habits or just habits in general, doing the little things well over time. So that's what we take them through. And then I leave them with this, and it's because, and I think it's not just football, but the guy that gets the job is not the guy that can throw it the furthest or can run the fastest or looks best in his pads, right? The guy that can get the job, that gets the job, is the one that can get 11 guys to operate the best. That's it. That's who gets the job. Is the one who can get 11 guys to come together and move the ball down the field more consistently than anybody else. And then I give them Psalm 139, 23, and 24. I say, if you want to be a good leader of this team, then you tell this to your coach. Search me. Well, this is David talking. Search me, oh God, know my heart. Right? Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous things in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. If you want to be a good coachable leader, search me, try me, see me, and lead me. Those are the things that you want to tell your coach, right? And so, that's what we take these kids through. And man, it's been encouraging for me, because I get to see that there are coaches pouring into these kids throughout the country. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. I love those 6 C's. I think it's super important. And one thing I want to ask you, Shaun, you touched a lot about being prepared. You talked about in the NFL sense, Tuesday we're doing this, Wednesday, Thursday, all to lead up to your quote unquote enemy, if you will, as a game. But in life, we obviously are fighting a spiritual warfare and evil. So how would you advise guys to prepare in a spiritual sense? Because we should be just as adamant or proactive about preparing for that versus, our careers or NFL, whatever your profession is. So how would you advise guys, like, this is what spiritual preparedness looks like, or how do you practice that in your own life? And how would you advise guys to go about that?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I used to think that if you go to Sunday, then you're a good Christian. You go to church on Sunday, you're a good Christian, right? I've learned that is not enough, at least for me, and I don't think it is for most people. So there's definitely a rhythm to life when I've got things going better, when I got things going the right way spiritually, and it is tuning in and being a part of church. If we can't be there physically, then certainly keeping up with the messages, but being there physically every time we're in town. And then we've got a small group or a life group from church that meets, and ours meets Sunday evening. I was earlier, about 4 years ago, we were kicking around, all right, should we go later in the week so that this could so we could touch on the message again in the middle of the week, instead of doing it right after Sunday. But man, Sunday evening's really the only evening we've got. So that's our small group. And then individually, you've got to be doing something individually, and maybe it's a daily devotional. Right now, so Brian and John his wife John, my wife and I, every Friday we were to learn scripture, one verse that week, and then Friday we'll get together and we'll say it to each other, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll pick another one for the next week. So we've been doing that every week in 2022. That has been really, I've never been able to memorize scripture. like I said, I mean, earlier we talked about, I was late coming to the faith, and I've been hitting the head a lot. So memorization of scripture was not my thing. But that's been a really cool discipline that we've added this year. A men's group, have a men's group, a group of men that you meet with, and don't miss that. If you can at all get in the habit of being there. And you know, and it can be a large men's group that you go to, and maybe you need I don't know if you can hear my dogs. Sorry if they're coming across. It's just started storming here. But anyway, have a small core group of men that you can really rely on, that you can get real with, even if you are joining a bigger men's group. But yeah, you got to have something daily that you're doing every single day. To me, it's best if I book in the day. If I wake up and I'm in the Word doing something, and if I'm laying in bed, instead of turning on the TV or watching some show, that I end the day in the Word. So if I can book in the day that way, then that's best for me. That's my best rhythm. Also, man, just the things that come on in your truck. You know, if I've got some windshield time, what am I filling it with? You know, is it praise and worship music, or is it something else? Is it listening to sermons, or is it listening to news or politics? You know, and some of that stuff's important to stay up on, but man, you can certainly go overboard with it, and it takes you in a dark place, right? Yeah. So, you know, even those little times that are kind of unplanned, and take advantage of those.
No doubt. That's good.
So I have a deeper question, Shaun. This might be one you've maybe been asked before, you maybe haven't been, but I'm excited for this because I'm just genuinely curious. You've obviously, like you said, you know, at a young age, you're playing professional football. You kind of walked us through mentally how at that early age, a lot of guys say, hey, I've made it, right? I've reached the peak of my career. I'm making great money. I'm well known, all this and that. It doesn't seem like for Shaun Hill, that really does a lot for you, right? It's like, hey, I did that. It's something I did. It was my profession. Every week was a grind. Every Tuesday, I didn't know how I was going to move the football down the field. So my question to you is 30, 40, 50, 70 years from now, when your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, when they talk about who you were, what do you want the legacy of Shaun Hill? What do you want them to say? Who do you want them to remember Shaun Hill as?
Man, I hope that the legacy is just as Christ following family, you know. Honestly, that and Brian talked about it on his. I did listen to his for a little bit, but he brings it up at every one of those quarterback coach sayings that what you do is not who you are, but who you are has a tremendous impact on what you do. You know, that football playing, that's what I did. It wasn't who I was, and that was really never my identity. And you know, the ones that we call them lifers. We know the ones that's their whole life. You can tell. You guys know, you can probably rattle off 5 or 6 right now on the top of your heads that is their whole life. And that wasn't for me. It was a big part of my life, and I gave everything I had to it. I put a lot of work into it. But yeah, that's just something I did. Honestly, yeah, if future generations can look back and just say, man, you know, he was a man after God's own heart, and we learned that from him, then that means far more than anything else.
Yeah, that's good. So I have a question that I think you'll be well equipped to answer, and I'll be honest too. From what I understood from your journey, I would not have been as familiar with the fact that you didn't come to faith, you know, until into your pro career. I would have guessed that from starting from humble roots and, you know, the smaller schools and no offers, that you were just a faithful guy, you know, and that was a part of kind of what guided you through. But I think that's what's awesome about your story, is that it's real, it's authentic. And a lot of guys on the show that are going to be listening to this can probably relate to it. So my question is, how would you advise the guys that say, okay, I have a faith life now, or maybe they always have, right? And they're in a high school locker room, they're in a college locker room, maybe someday, God willing, they're in an NFL locker room. What tips would you give those guys? You already gave us some free game. You said, hey, what are you doing tonight? get that answer and then hit them with the Bible study. That's free game. But the question that I had is, how would you advise guys to disciple and share the gospel, in a locker room setting or in a sports setting? And that might translate into business or what have you, but I'd just be curious. I'm sure you were around a lot of people, maybe some who did a good job of that. It sounds like, Drew and Trent and some of those guys were influential to you, but what would you say to those athletes that are watching and saying, hey, Shaun's stirring me. I want to be the Drew Stanton to somebody else. I want to be the Trent Dilfer to somebody else. How should they go about doing that?
Oh man, that's such a good question. And it really just depends on the situation. Like I said, for Trent, I'm sure Trent wanted to baptize me the next day, but that's just not where I was, and he was fine with that. He was fine filling that role of just answering questions, not getting upset with me and my stupidity, being patient with me in that time. And Alex Smith was in the quarterback room too at the time. And so just answering our questions and being that type of leader. And then, it depends on the situation. But I think the one thing, no matter what the situation, the best thing you can do is live it. Just live it. And then good things will come from that. And then you'll start to kind of understand or realize the people you're around and where you can pour into them. Just, hey, somebody's going through something. As long as if you're a great teammate or you're a great leader for somebody and they can confide in you, then they do, and you can say, man, I've got some great resources for you. Here they are. and then it says biblical teaching and all these things. There's so many ways in, and God will give you those opportunities. He sure will. And he's going to prepare you for them. You're going to be prepared for them. It's not something that we need to be afraid of. That's for sure. I truly believe that he's going to prepare us for them, and he's going to present them to us.
Yeah, that's good. I was just kind of curious about that. That was a question I had, is who is influential in your faith journey? Because it was cool to hear you say too, that there's a lot of believers in the NFL, because that's something that from the outside looking in, it certainly doesn't always appear that way. Those aren't usually the guys that are, on the Pepsi commercials or, that you're seeing in all that. So kind of going back a little bit, you mentioned that you put a lot of what you had into the physical training of going into the NFL. And this is a similar question to what Kyle asked about, preparing for the spiritual warfare. But the Bible talks about, and I'll never forget it, I don't know if this scripture will ring a bell for you, but the verse that talks about physical training is good, but spiritual training is better. First time I heard that verse, I was on the treadmill, just ran a few miles. I read that. I'm like, come on, man, I can't even be on the treadmill and you're killing me. Like, physical training is good, spiritual training is better. So is there anything that you learned in the NFL? Because obviously you're talking about the consistency, everything like that. Is there anything in the physical training side of the NFL that you think that our viewers could translate for spiritual training?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of goes back to the rhythm I just explained. When I'm living closest to Jesus, that rhythm, it's the same as training in the NFL, and the rhythm of your week and the way you prepare and get ready. I think just having that schedule throughout sports, having that consistency in the schedule, I truly believe that translates to the business world and certainly to the spiritual world, for sure. One other thing I'll say is I wish that everybody had the opportunity that football players have to have everything you do videotaped, and then have to sit there with your superiors and watch it. Imagine living life like that, right? That's what we get used to doing in the NFL. You go out, you practice, everything's videotaped. Now it's high def video, so they can see your duck.
See everything.
I used to be able to get away with that, but now they're high def videos. But if we all live that way, like we had to sit down and watch everything we did with our superiors. But truly, that's the way it is, right? God sees everything we do. Mm-hmm. So that's one advantage that football players have over most people, is we've had to live like that.
That's cool. Well, last question I have for you, Shaun. It was something you said in a previous interview that really stuck out to me. You said as you kind of progressed in your career, your job kind of turned into being the leader behind the leader. And I think it was maybe when you came to Minnesota and you were behind quarterbacks and you were kind of the one who was advising the people that the message needed to come from. You're kind of the guy behind the scenes. I think that's similar in our walk as Christians, where it's like, someone said a quote once that says like, we're important, but we're not the point, basically. And I think it's similar. It's like, we're just servants, like you said, here to do the Lord's work. I think as people too, like pride, and we want that attention and that we want people to think highly of us. How do you kind of go about that in your professional life? How was it you taking that step back and say, hey, I recognize my role here is now to equip these guys? And how would you advise young Christian men who we're all trying to make something for ourselves? We want to be kind of the center. And how do we balance that and take a step back and say, hey, we're just trying to be humble and serve the Lord in whatever capacity he's put us in? How do you kind of marry those two? Because I think for a lot of guys, including myself at times, it's like, hey, I want people to look at me. I want it. But it's like, hey, my job isn't always to be the one getting attention. It's to shine back to him. So I just thought that was a cool thing you said, being the leader behind the leader. So I'd love for you to expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, I'll start with in the spiritual. Every one of us, if we're not in the Word, like we talked about earlier, we're going to start turning on ourselves. We're going to want the attention on us. But if we are in the Word, then He's going to spur that. He's going to get that thing turned in the right direction. So I think that's the best way to handle it spiritually. And I'll say this: the reason why I played 15 years is because I was willing to do that. You guys, it's hilarious. You'll turn on ESPN and there's guys that have played and they're like, oh, they need to bring in so and so. He's better than their option to, you know. And it's a guy that started for, 12 years somewhere. But what they fail to realize is that guy, yes, he's probably more talented, but he refuses to do that. He refuses to serve the starter, the guy who's actually leading the team and the one that's supposed to lead the team. Right. And so that's why I played that long, because I promise you I was not the most talented guy out there. I was the least talented person in an NFL locker room for 15 years, probably on any NFL roster for 15 years in a row. And I have that trophy somewhere, I think. But man, yeah, I don't know. In the NFL, I saw so many people just throw away their careers because they weren't able to just swallow their pride and be that person. I think the same thing probably happens a lot in the business world and in other places. Man, if you've got to do whatever your job description is that day. And if you're a man of the kingdom, which we all want to be, then what God has you in that role for a purpose, right? And he's going to use you in that role. And sometimes that's to lead the leader. And sometimes that's to keep him on track so that he gets the glory or she gets the glory. And that's fine. We got to trust in God's timing, and he's got us there for a reason.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. I guess my question, and maybe your life journey has just developed this on its own, but a big verse that's coming to mind as I hear you talk is that the exalted will be humble, the humbled will be exalted. And I'll just say we were pretty pumped up. We're like, hey, we're going to have somebody who, we grew up watching. We're big football fans. We're going to talk to a former NFL quarterback, and nothing about your vibe, Shaun, gives that out. You just seem like a very regular guy. You love people. You want to engage with us. You want to add value to our audience. Very humble, even on this episode, right? You're not sharing all these fancy stories or anything like that, just trying to share truth. Has humility always been, because it sounds like for you, kind of the blend of confidence and humility. I think that can be a fine line, right? You want to be humble, but at the end of the day, you need to believe in your abilities. So how do you balance that, right? Because you're talking about serving the leader and doing all these things. But what do you think the blend is between humility and confidence? Is it something where sometimes you need to be more one, more the other? You talked about it in the media, but I think that especially our generation with social media and everything like that, humility is hard. We talk about that. You travel, and a lot of times you're traveling and on the way there, you're thinking about the picture you're going to take and the post you're going to make and how cool that's going to make you look. So can you just talk through a little bit of your philosophy around humility and confidence, how they play together, and, you know, when each is needed?
Yeah, it is a tough balance. I've always said that the confidence is felt and arrogance is heard. You know, if I got to tell you how good I am, that's arrogance. You know, but if for some reason just confident, you can feel confidence. You can feel it in a room. You can feel it from a person. It's just something that is there. You know, as far as humility goes, yeah, we used to. There was always a saying in the NFL: if you're not humble, this game will humble you. And that was true for the ones that made it for a while, and then some of them could never be humbled, and they didn't last very long. You know, so some people just aren't necessarily able to be humbled for whatever reason. But man, I think that's part of the reason why we have these bumps in the road, why God allows some of these things to happen to us, so we do learn humility. Because yeah, if you're not humble, this life this life will humble you. I believe that. Yeah, if your heart's set where it needs to be, then this life will humble you.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. Another quick question I wanted to ask, and this is kind of going back to the episode with Brian. So Brian was a little more in our face with this. This man was sitting in front of a bookshelf. He had a Hebrew Bible. He had things I'd never seen before. I didn't even know that they were in print. So he shared a lot of great resources. I know some guys who have watched that episode have hit us up and said, "Hey, I checked out this book that, you know, Brian bought." I think that's a cool thing though, too, is that you guys have such different backgrounds. He grew up in the faith, you know, very strong faith family, all those things. So what about on your journey? Have there been any resources that have stuck out that you're like, hey, when I'm making my weekly game plan, this is a thing I always fall back on, or any books or devotionals or whatever it may be? Kind of what's in your resource toolkit that has helped you grow as a Christian?
You know, one that I've shared with a lot of people, and it was one of the first ones that we did as our men's Bible study 4 or 5 years ago here. It's called Fathered by God, and it was just a great study for men. And I grew up with I had a great father. He's passed away. He died in an accident here on my farm 11 years ago. But he was a great father. Not necessarily a great husband, but he was a great father. And going through that book, Fathered by God, you realize, you know what, no matter how good of a father I think I'm going to be, or I try to be, I'm going to mess my kids up too, in some way, shape, or form. And our fathers did something, whether they intended to or not, that kind of messes us up a little bit. And the idea of the book is, and I truly believe this, is to not point the kids to us, because we're going to fail. We are going to make mistakes, but to point them to Him, right? So that's the Father by God principle. And if I want to be a good father, then I need to be pointing my kids to the one true Father, not lifting myself up on that pedestal, but giving that to Him. So that to me was a great resource, because all of us, somehow, some way, for some reason, all of us have some daddy issue somewhere. Yeah, so that was a good one. But other than that, yeah, and Brian's really brought this to our study, is just making sure we're in the Word. You know, you can read those books and the books are great, but they are written by humans. You know, we got to get into God's Word. So yeah, like I said, right now we're doing this Philippians study, and look up Hear journaling. Hear journal. So you do a highlight, and then you explain, and then you apply, and then there's a response. And it's a really good way to kind of go through a book in the Bible without going line by line and things like that. You go more chapter by chapter, and something sticks out, and then you kind of apply this Hear method to it. So yeah, look that up. Hear journaling. That's been a good addition for me. Yeah, I hope that helps.
No, that's good. That's good. You got any final wrap ups? I got one final brain buster.
No,
but
I'll leave it to you. I'm answered everything I had, so thank you.
Cool.
Lay him with the big one here.
Yeah, this is a good one. So I don't know how far you got into our episode with Brian. I don't know if you watched it to the end, but we always like to do something a little fun and kind of targeted towards our guests. So for you, I'm going to put you on the spot with this one because you're a quarterback. You're used to pressure situations. Okay, so spiritually, we got a big game here. It's all tied up in the fourth quarter. We got no timeouts. We got 2 minutes on the clock. So we gotta get our guys that are watching this show. We say, hey, we need a touchdown. We need a field goal. We gotta move the ball. We're in the 2-minute drill. So if you had all of our viewers, all the guys who are going to watch this show kind of huddled up, and you had to leave them with a final quick pre-drive speech saying, hey, we're in the 2-minute drill. This is what we need to hear. What would you say are kind of the last things that you would give them to guide them to where they need to be spiritually and help them win the game of life?
I'd just go back to Psalm 139, 23 and 24. Search me, O God, know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. That to me is just a, man, that's a good word. Yeah. And it's one that I think takes some discipline to even ask, like, do we even really want God to search us and reveal to us what's the wickedness in us? I sometimes I'll be honest, no, I don't want to deal with that right now, but man, that's such a good word.
Yeah, I love that.
Touchdown.
That's a touchdown. That's game over, baby. We got it. Well, Shaun, this has been a pleasure. Again, I'm glad that you took the time, and I think our viewers are going to love this one. There's a lot of really good practical advice, and I can just tell from listening to where you're at that I would just encourage you that you're early in your journey. Your playing days might be done, but I think you're coaching and educating and continuing that legacy of being a God-fearing family man, I think is just beginning. So on behalf of our whole viewership, all the guys who watch this, I pray that eternal salvations will be changed. I pray that there'll be a guy watching this that'll say, hey, Shaun Hill was messed up. I'm messed up. Maybe I can be saved like him. I might not play in the NFL, but maybe I can win at this game of life with some of these tips and strategies that he left us with. So Shaun, we appreciate you, sir. Thanks for joining the show. And if you've watched this far, until next time, keep advancing the kingdom.
Hey,
Let's go.
yeah.